Hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about a troubling poll on how young Americans view Israel and the Islamic terrorist organization Hamas. Just to recap, Hamas is the group that carried out the October 7th massacre, in which 1,200 people were brutally murdered in truly horrific ways. They didn't even try to hide it. On the contrary, they saw this campaign of mass murder as a source of pride. A recent poll asked Americans of various backgrounds about their views on the Israel-Hamas war, which has been ongoing ever since the aforementioned massacre. The results unfortunately didn't shock me, but they are deeply concerning nonetheless. In the survey, when 18 to 24-year-old Americans were asked, in the Israel-Hamas conflict, do you support more Israel or more Hamas, the majority, 60%, said they support Hamas more. This is a huge moral failing for the United States of America. Hamas is a Sunni Islamist terrorist organization with a backwards, reactionary ideology based on Sharia law. Hamas enforces strict gender roles on girls, in some cases forcing them to wear the hijab in schools. And in 2010, it banned men from working in women's hair salons, in line with the gender apartheid aspirations of Islamists. The group is so vile that it even has public executions. According to a report by the human rights organization Amnesty International, in one of the most shocking incidents, 6 men were publicly executed by Hamas forces outside Al-Omari Mosque on the 22nd of August in front of hundreds of spectators, including children. Hamas announced the men were suspected collaborators who had been sentenced to death in revolutionary courts. The hooded men were dragged along the floor to kneel by a wall facing the crowd. Then each man was shot in the head individually before being sprayed with bullets fired from an AK-47. Any reasonable person would agree that Hamas is a vile, barbaric organization that deserves no sympathy in the slightest. Yet, in the West, we see prominent groups defending these theocratic reactionaries. A local Black Lives Matter chapter in Chicago celebrated the October 7th massacre on Instagram. The post featured a drawing of a Hamas paraglider carrying a Palestinian flag, alongside the caption, "I stand with Palestine." This was not an isolated post. Another Black Lives Matter chapter in Phoenix stated, "We will call them freedom fighters, and we will stand in full support of the resistance happening in Palestine." In Salt Lake City, the local chapter of Democratic Socialists of America denied that the October 7th massacre was an act of terrorism or that it even was an anti-Semitic attack. Instead, they described the attack as Palestinian liberation. It is deeply troubling that in many communities the phrase Palestinian liberation seems to be a euphemism for terrorism and genocidal massacre. The civil rights advocacy group Anti-Defamation League wrote an article about these problematic statements, but I think their rhetoric was too mild. They described the groups that made these disgusting statements as fringe. These groups and these opinions are not fringe. They are very common in current political discourse. I mean, it's not like anti-Israel protests are uncommon in the West, and they often use slogans such as "globalize the intifada" and "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which are calls for violence and annihilation. Furthermore, Zoran Mamdani, who is currently running for mayor in New York City, is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. This is the same organization whose Salt Lake City chapter described the murder of 1,200 people as Palestinian liberation. They have also parroted Russian state propaganda, claiming the US and NATO's provoked the invasion of Ukraine. This development challenges the notion that the West is a haven of liberal and tolerant values. It is truly despicable that so many people in the West side with these savages. The genocide accusation against Israel became significantly more common after October 7th, but this wasn't the first time radical activists accused Israel of genocide. As early as 2016, the coalition called Movement for Black Lives accused Israel of committing genocide against Palestinians. So even before the 2023 war, activists on the far left were using the genocide label in an attempt to delegitimize Israel. I have to admit that, looking back over the past 2 years, I was quite naive. I remember thinking when the October 7th massacre happened, wow, this sure was a heinous attack. This will probably open the eyes of people around the world to how awful and inhumane Hamas is. In the coming months, we will see more sympathy for Israel by groups who previously were critical of it, and more people will be disgusted by radical Islamist groups. However, I was completely wrong. Groups previously critical of Israel became increasingly aggressive in their anti-Israeli hatred. Surprisingly, hate crimes against Jews rose more than those against Muslims. Note, I don't mean that hate crimes against anyone are good. I was just surprised that when Jewish people are massacred, anti-Semitic voices get even more amplified than previously. I find this development extremely worrying. It seems like the West is heading into a more radicalized and polarized direction. We have prominent figures on both sides of the political spectrum, such as Tucker Carlson and Zoran Mamdani, who get more and more popular in part due to their anti-Semitic activism. At the same time, liberals, centrists, pro-Israel people, pro-Ukraine people, and pro-democracy people get less and less popular. Just to give an example of how absurd the anti-Israel movement is, let's examine the following case. On August 31, 2024, the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation published a tweet, saying, "Hamas, release the hostages." They received massive backlash for this. One user wrote, "Did AIPAC write this post for you? Just let that sink in." The most prominent Black Lives Matter organization gets accused of being funded by AIPAC simply for urging Hamas to release the hostages. Also, Ousmane Babir replied, "Seeing black people backing Israel is one of the saddest things possible, given how the founders of Zionism considered black people to be inferior to white people. I believe Malcolm X had a term of oppressed black people that loved their oppressors." He then cited a quote allegedly from Arthur Balfour, stating that the white and black races are not born with equal capabilities. Using a British politician to label early Zionists as white supremacists, rather than citing Zionist sources, is very misleading and absurd. Also, urging Hamas to release the hostages is not only a pro-Israel position, it is a pro-human position. As these radical groups gain influence, we will see how freedom of speech is increasingly attacked, democratic norms violated, and, in particular, hatred of Jews becomes normalized. That is why it's more important than ever that we fight anti-Zionist bigotry and oppose radicalization on both sides of the political spectrum. Thank you for watching this video to the end. See you in the next one.